A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When the coming of the evening that same day, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us cross over to the other shore." Leaving the crowd behind, they took Jesus in the boat in which he was sitting. There were other boats with them. Then a fierce gale arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so much that it was almost swamped. But Jesus was in the stern, through all, sound asleep on a cushion. They woke him up and said, "Teacher, does it not matter to you that we are going to drown?" Jesus awoke, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be calm." And the wind dropped, and everything was perfectly calm. Jesus then said to the disciples, "Why were you so frightened? Have you no faith?" But then they became filled with fear and said to one another, "Who is this whom even the wind and the sea obey?" The good news of salvation. Glory and praise to our Savior, Jesus Christ. In our gospel, on one hand, we are witnessing a miracle. A storm has quickly come upon the disciples' boat. They are overtaken with fear. Jesus says to the raging waters and thundering clouds that are about to overtake the boat, "Quiet, be calm." Then, no longer fearing for their lives, the disciples experience a different kind of fear and awe. What have they just witnessed? Fearfully, they begin to wonder, who is this man, Jesus, that can speak to the sea and it obeys? Jesus responds by chiding them for their fear and their little faith as he says, "Why are you so frightened? Have you no faith?" This is one of the instances where I really feel for the disciples and frankly feel a little frustrated with Jesus's response. Especially as a chaplain, if I ever spoke to someone in the midst of a tragedy like that, I probably wouldn't be a chaplain very long. Why is Jesus upset with his disciples? They have every right to fear for their lives and similarly feel overwhelmed by witnessing someone that can apparently speak to the sea and the sea obeys. But Jesus doesn't seem to have a lot of compassion in that moment. He equates their fear with lack of faith. But I imagine many of you, like me, feel compassion for the disciples in this moment because we have all been there. We've all been tossed in storms and feared for our lives at times. We've all had moments where it seems like God is maybe asleep or disinterested in our plight. As we reflect back on this last year and a few months that we have survived, the trauma and tragedy, there have been times where it's easy to start to wonder, where is God? Is God asleep? I heard on the news yesterday that we just reached the 600,000 deaths by COVID in our country. I frequently visit my friends on Lake Street here in Minneapolis, and there are still multiple bulldozed lots from fires and buildings that are boarded up from the pain and divisiveness in this nation that remains palpable and dangerous. I think many of us might want to say, "Jesus, does it matter to you that we are going down in this storm? Where is our miracle, Jesus? When are you going to say to mutating viruses and swelling racism, 'Quiet, be still'? Where is our miracle?" As much as we want to ask that question, and I think it's perfectly okay for us to ask that question and lift our anger and frustration to God, I'm slowly coming to realize that faith is not about miracles. As I've lived through my own suffering and witnessed the suffering of others, there begins to be a realization that faith is about something completely different. The point of our gospel story today is not that Jesus can work miracles, not that he can calm the sea. The disciples have already seen him do many miracles by this point. The point of this gospel is it's yet another attempt of Jesus trying to reveal his identity and ultimately what our identity is in him. All of the healing miracles, the multiplication of loaves, the calming of the sea, isn't about teaching us to have faith in miracles. It's about teaching us to have faith in Jesus and the life that he led so that we might live a similar life. Because we know that Jesus's life was one of storms, of temptation, of loss, of loneliness, and of death. If our faith was about miracles, then Jesus would not be a good example. Jesus calmed the storms not to save the disciples, but to prepare them to walk with him to Calvary. When Jesus said, "Quiet, be calm," he was revealing to the disciples that he was not only a prophet, but that he was one with the Creator, the one who had birthed the seas. The disciples and we need to be continually grounded in that truth if we are going to live the faith that God has called us to. Not a faith in miracles, not a faith in logic, believing that if we do what is right, right things will happen to us. Rather, a faith that believes that love cannot be defeated. A faith that death is not and never will be the last word. Faith ultimately in life with a capital L. Our God today, or our gospel today, is intentionally linked to the first reading of how God reveals God's self to Job. When you heard that reading, did anything about it strike you? Because when I read it the first time, I just read right through it. I think I've heard, multiple stories of God and those narratives of God creating the earth. But when I read it again, I realized we were being presented with a very different image of God than we typically get. This is what God says to Job. I held back the sea behind partitions when it burst forth from my womb, when I created clouds as earth's remnant and thick darkness as its swaddling clothes. God says that she birthed the sea from her womb, that she clothed the earth, that she swaddled it like a mother swaddling a baby, using the dark skies to cradle it and set its limits. In Job's suffering and experience with suffering, a different faith emerges. God reveals herself in a completely new way. God is not a puppet master. God does not operate in our logic. God is not a miracle worker. God instead is our mother. And a mother knows chaos, knows pain, knows tragedy, knows what it is to create, knows what it is to watch her own body become another's body, knows what it means to have pain and suffer and would choose to do it over and over again at the singular glimpse of love between a parent and a child. God did not require more faith from Job. God already knew that Job was the most faithful human that had ever walked the earth. But through Job, we are invited into a deeper faith, one that does not stop suffering, but transforms it and us. Our faith is not about miracles, even though they do on occasion happen and they are beautiful. Our faith is about death transforming into new life. Our faith is about brokenness becoming wholeness. Our faith is about a shattered world discovering that we were born from God and are God's beloved. 600,000 dead in our country alone. Deep pain emerging in new ways from this crisis that has torn open the unhealed wound of racism in our country. No miracle can save us, but faith can heal us. Faith in a beloved Creator who birthed this world from her own being. Faith in a brother who faced death and lived love. Faith in a spirit who rushes through those fierce waters and into our own spirits. We are all walking to the cross together, but there is no reason to fear any longer, because it is our brokenness that allows us to reach out and do this together, and to know with surety that on the other side of the cross is new life. So this evening, and as we navigate the storms of our lives, let us be like the oceans. Let us feel the swaddling embrace of God and be still. And as God's beloved,